So, guys, we want to spend some time talking about how, Mel, particularly at a group of networks like A+E, the importance of continuing to understand your audience at a more granular level beyond the age, sex, demographics that we've been talking about for years, and Ben, how a company like yours is helping do that. So, Mel, let's just start with you. I mean, maybe let's start from the beginning before we can get into what you've learned and some of the research you've done. Why has this even been a topic lately? I mean, at some level, it seems like a pretty obvious question, but I think it's good to hear from you personally. Like, what's going on that you see in the marketplace that has driven an investment in time and energy to understand more about who's watching your programs across all your different networks?
I guess there's been an explosion and a recognition recently, really, in the power of the data that's available. The amount of data that we can now get, and the detail and the definition that we can have about our audiences through products like Ben's product at 605, it's amazing. And I think the core issue is that for years there have been intuitive assumptions made about an audience. So as some of the conversation earlier today talked about the fact that there had been program-based selling. And that we are now moving to a world of audience-based selling. There has always been an assumption underlying the program that certain kinds of content were particularly effective at generating certain kinds of audiences, and that those environments were good for selling certain kinds of products versus others. So we've always had an appreciation of understanding our audiences more deeply and constructing rate cards so that they would yield in a way that maximized that. But what we now have available to us, I would say it's a lot like the move from Nielsen diaries to people meters. There's been an awakening to the amount of data and the granularity with which we can understand our audiences. So now it's kind of an arms race to see how we can get at that data and how well we can define that data, and inevitably, at the very end of this, the attribution that we can offer that says advertising on TV is effective.
Yeah. And have you seen, listen, we all spend time, most of this industry, certainly I spend a lot of time working with a lot of marketers who are pushing for this new type of data and at least talking about, and in many cases, actually changing how they spend. Have you seen that, Mel, reach a critical mass as well?
Well, we see a tremendous amount of interest on the part of marketers, and essentially, the more sophisticated the marketer, the better they are at applying data to their purchases and understanding how effectively they can reach audiences and convert those audiences. Anecdotally, we're all hearing this up front, and if you've been reading some of the trades about the upfront, there was a piece that Brian Weiser had in the trades in the last day or two about P&G moving money back into TV. Anecdotally, we've been hearing about this for the last 18 months. P&G was one of the first advertisers that probably moved significant amounts of money toward digital. So I think it's a very good indicator of just how popular and how powerful the use of data has become and how effective advertisers are in using it.
Yeah, great, thank you. So Ben, you guys are helping power intelligence like this, and I know that you and A+E worked on a bunch of research. As we start to dig in with what you guys have learned, maybe specifically by A+E, just talk about what are the data sets you're pulling from that allows you to uncover that more granularity in terms of who's watching what program and what network?
Sure. So, in the last several months, we're a relatively new company. We launched in November, and since November, we've been using predominantly the addressable footprint, which is about 40 million households, and collecting ad exposure data or viewing records from the 40 million households for campaigns that we've run. What we can do is basically match the ad exposure data to response level data, so whether it's traffic to a website or transactions, to get a sense as to what the transactional behavior is for those exposed to different types of ads. And then soon we're going to be launching a programming analytics product that will take kind of second-by-second viewership in show, not just the ad breaks, to provide deeper insights for programmers. The work that we did with Mel was primarily focused around the advertising piece and understanding ad behavior and different types of purchase propensities across all the A+E family of networks.
So let's dive into what you guys learned, right? So one of the things that we talked about as we were preparing for today is that there's this, that myth busting might be a really good theme. And one of the assumptions that came up, which seems like a pretty common assumption, is that that Lifetime is a pretty much female audience and a pretty 18 to 49, and call it a day. And I guess in unpacking a lot of the research, you found that sure, it's still a heavily female audience, but there's a lot more useful intelligence there. I don't know which ones you want to take that first, but what's some of the insights there, and why is that relevant?
Well, I'll take a quick dive. I mean, I think we have assumed, and large advertisers have always assumed, that a mass audience like the one that we can offer up with Lifetime, and a scale audience, women 18 to 49, women 25 to 54, is that it's a particularly great audience to reach buyers of, healthcare products, beauty care products, packaged goods products, and that's true. What we're also finding out is that it's a wonderful environment for reaching women who are the principal decision maker on buying cars, or reaching women who are the principal decision maker in a household in terms of investments. So what we're able to do is we dig down through the layers of the data and the information, is unpack these kinds of insights that really allow us then to maximize the value of our inventory and to target it in a way that maximizes value both for us and for the advertiser.
I guess the first question I have is, well, how do you know that? What attributes are you uncovering that shows that to be true?
Well, what we did, in this particular exercise was match the ad exposure data against all the A+E networks. It was about 350 million records against 40 million households over a few months. And then we matched that against transactional data to see what the indices were. How do audiences respond? And part of it was just looking at purchase behavior in general. The other part of it was looking at the effect of ad exposure. Did ad exposure drive activity? One of the things that was really interesting was that across the board, for all of the A+E networks, responsiveness to TV way over-indexed versus the average television viewer. What that means is that there was a much higher propensity for a viewer to purchase product after seeing an ad on an A+E network than the average for TV viewing overall, which was interesting. And then when we kind of drilled down, a couple of things that were really interesting, which isn't so surprising in Lifetime, obviously over-indexed on weight consciousness, however, also over-indexed on burger lovers. So they obviously, love burgers, but they're more weight conscious. Another thing that was interesting was among the different retail categories, men's apparel was, among the top indexed categories for Lifetime viewers, which again isn't so surprising, but I think it was interesting to have the data to prove it. And I think the other point that resonated was that the A+E networks really indexed high against younger families in large part, but younger families in particular, which is interesting given today's myth that younger audiences are kind of migrating off the dial, and it's not that that's not happening. It's just that television consumption continues to grow within that segment.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it sounds like, to your point, I don't know that these are unexpected findings at some level, but that just the fact that we can now dig into this level of data allows us to unpack what is a pretty generic targeting definition, right? Women of a certain age group into much more granular segments, which is what the theme of, again, what we're talking about all morning, and what I think the theme of the industry is, getting to precision and addressability, but of course still needing mass and scale. And I think that's the interesting correlation that I'm curious, Mel, in terms of how you are thinking about balancing with your sales team and with your client discussions, which is, as you unpack this type of intelligence, which is clearly what marketers and agencies are looking for, and you can now do a better job of saying, hey, it's not just a monolithic audience. I've actually got, there's dimension and richness to those that watch our programs. I'm sure you're having to have different conversations and explain that potential while also still balancing the fact that if you get too finite, number one, you don't really have you can't deliver in that methodology necessarily, but there's also still value to scale. So how do you go about yourself and maybe your sales team having that discussion?
Yeah, I think where you're headed is a conversation that we are having more and more of, which is what are the ad products that we need to be developing and which ad products are appropriate for which platforms. So when we talk about our linear networks, where we have distribution into almost 100 million households, and the quality of the viewing experience is such a key factor to the environment on those networks. We're thinking about ad load. We're thinking about the ability to reduce clutter, to deliver a more engaged audience to the ad. As we think about other platforms, we know that if an ad is presented across different platforms, that recall increases pretty markedly. So we're spending a lot of time trying to figure out what is the right product, what are the new products that we have to develop, and how can we most effectively use all the different assets that we have, whether we're talking about desktop products, mobile products, connected devices. So our content is truly, portable across all of these different platforms. TV may be a box, it may be a screen on the wall, but it's really about this content, and that's where we have this unique advantage in terms of the audiences that we can generate and deliver to marketers. And then by understanding much more about them, we can tailor the ad product and tailor our delivery of that audience to advertisers in a way that I think maximizes value. And so that's where we really want to get.
Yeah. I'm sure you won't share with us the secrets of your upfront strategy, right? Probably not today.
Well, I'm happy to share that it seems like the upfront market is not only healthy this year, but will be healthy as we've heard for many years to come, which makes perfect sense because it is a premium environment.
Yeah, well,
you can't make more of it.
Right. Well, and I guess that the serious question behind that is, of those different products you're talking about across those different screens and devices, again, it's with some level of generality, I'm sure. How do you tie that all into a conversation with a marketer? Is it as simple as saying, hey, listen, you want this audience across all screens. We're designing different experiences, different ad products for those different environments, and let's do a deal that allows you to access that across those screens? Or is it a more complex conversation still at this point?
It's a varied conversation because I think everybody is at different places in terms of the way they're thinking about building their media plan across platforms. It's very easy to engage advertisers in terms of their requirements for linear. As you then engage them on what are your requirements on other platforms, there's a huge organizational effort to bring all of those pieces together. And partially then that's just the beginning of the adventure because now you're getting into this issue that was also hinted at this morning in terms of cross-platform measurement.
Yeah.
How do we harmonize all of those different impressions and views that we're getting across these different platforms in a way that comes back with an understandable reach and frequency against your plan?